Jean-Roch Coignet's memoirs offer a vivid account of his life as a soldier under Napoleon Bonaparte. The French army is invading Russia. Let's begin. On June 26, 1812, we crossed the Niemen. Prince Murat led the vanguard with his cavalry. Marshal Davout, with 60,000 men, marched in columns, as did the entire guard and its artillery on the main road to Vilna. It is hard to imagine such columns moving through barren plains, with only poor villages devastated by the Russians. Prince Murat reached them at the bridge of Kauno. They were forced to retreat to Vilna. The weather, which had been beautiful until then, suddenly changed. On June 29th, a violent storm hit us around 3 o'clock, just before we reached a village that I struggled to reach. Upon arriving in the village, we could not unharness our horses. We had to unbridle them, mow grass for them, and light fires. The storm was so fierce with hail and snow that we had trouble containing our horses. We had to tie them to the wheels. I was freezing. Unable to endure it any longer, I opened one of my wagons and hid inside it. The morning brought a heart-breaking sight. In the nearby cavalry camp, the ground was covered with horses dead from the cold. More than 10,000 succumbed that dreadful night. Emerging from my wagon, I saw 3 of my horses dead. I immediately redistributed the remaining horses among my 4 wagons. These unfortunate animals were trembling so violently that they broke everything as soon as they were harnessed. They threw themselves into their collars recklessly, were mad, and made leaps of rage. Had I delayed by an hour, I would have lost them all. I can say it took all our courage to control them. On the road, we found soldiers who had died, unable to withstand the monstrous storm, which demoralized many of our men. Fortunately, our forced marches made the Emperor of Russia, who had established his headquarters in Vilna, leave. In this large city, order could be restored in the army. Upon his arrival on June 29th, the Emperor ordered the stragglers of all arms to be corralled in a large enclosure outside the city. They were well confined and given rations. The gendarmerie was everywhere to gather them. 3 battalions of 700 to 800 men were formed. They had all kept their weapons. After some rest, the army advanced into immense forests, which had to be searched for fear of enemy ambushes. An army can only march slowly through such terrain to avoid being cut off. Before departing, the Emperor sent off his guard chasseurs, and we stayed near him. On July 13th, he ordered 22 non-commissioned officers to be presented to him to be promoted to lieutenants in the line. As the chasseurs had left, all promotions fell on us. We had to be on the square at 2 o'clock to be presented to the Emperor. At noon, I was on the square returning with my packet of letters under my arm for distribution. Major Belcourt grabbed my arm and, squeezing it tightly, said, "My brave, you will be promoted to lieutenant in the line today. I thank you, but I do not want to return to the line. I tell you, you will wear lieutenant's epaulettes today. I give you my word that if the Emperor assigns you to the line, I will bring you back to the guard. No argument. Be on the square at 2 o'clock, without fail. Very well, I will be there. I will be there before you. That is enough, Captain." At 2 o'clock, the Emperor arrived to review us. We were all 22 in a row. Starting from the right, he looked at these fine non-commissioned officers, sizing them up from head to toe, and said to General d'Orsay, "They will make fine officers in the regiments." When he reached me, he looked at me as the smallest. The Major said, "This is our instructor. He does not want to join the line." "What? You do not want to join the line?" "No, sire. I wish to remain in your guard." "Well, I appoint you to my small general staff." Addressing his chief of staff, Count Monthyon, he said, "Take this little veteran as an adjutant to the small headquarters." How happy I was to stay near the Emperor. I did not realize I was leaving paradise to fall into hell. Time taught me well. The brave General Monthyon came to me. "Here is my address. Tomorrow at 8 o'clock. Come to my place for orders." That evening my comrades rummaged through my sack. The next day, at the appointed time, I arrived near the general, who received me with the gracious demeanour of a man who loves old soldiers. "Well," he said, "you will serve near the Emperor. If you do not mind cutting your long moustache, you would please me. The Emperor does not like moustaches in his staff. Well, make the sacrifice. If I sent you on a mission, would you be afraid of a Cossack? No, General. I need 2 of your comrades who can command, to each lead a battalion of stragglers. You know them, bring them to me. As for you, I have seen you command. You know your business. I have 3 battalions of stragglers to send back to their army corps. You will command them tomorrow before the Emperor. So, come with your 2 comrades, and we will leave immediately to organize the 3 battalions." Arriving at the enclosure, the general called the soldiers of the 3rd Corps, set them aside, and so on. The operation completed, we returned to settle our accounts with the Guard's quartermaster to receive our certificates and our mass. Fortunately for me, the trained soldiers had provided me with a fine horse, with a saddle and portmanteau. I was well equipped in that regard, but I had no hat, no sabre. I only had my forage cap and had been stripped of my stripes. I felt like a degraded non-commissioned officer, which pained me. I went to collect what was owed to me from the quartermaster and get my service certificate, and bid farewell to my good chiefs. They told me to choose a horse from my team. "Thank you. I am well mounted." I had set aside a fine horse all saddled and bridled that is not part of the equipment. I leave everything in good condition. Farewell, my brave. We will see each other often. If I had a hat, I would be content. Well, stop by tonight. You will find one at the quartermaster's. I will take care of it, said the adjutant major. I am saved, and if I can find a sabre for you, I will take care of it immediately. We owe you that. I left them confused. I went to Count Monthion to inform him that I was free. I will have your campaign entry paid as a lieutenant to equip you. Finish your affairs quickly. We will not delay in leaving. Tomorrow, General, all my accounts will be settled. That evening, I went to the quartermaster's, found a hat and an old sabre, and felt stronger once again. The next morning, I presented myself with the large sabre at my side and the bicorn hat. "Ah, good," he said. "I will find epaulets for you. We leave on July 16th. Come twice a day for my orders." On the morning of the 15th, I presented myself to Count Monthion, who said, "We leave tomorrow. You will have 700 men to lead to the 3rd Corps. At noon, at the chateau, before the Emperor. I have just informed your 2 comrades to be there at 11 o'clock to take command of their battalion. We must go immediately to review them. The rolls are by regiment. My aide-de-camp has gone to call the roll. We will find everything ready." We arrived at the enclosure. All were under arms, forming 3 battalions. He handed over command to us and recognized us as their chiefs. He gave us our route sheets and the roll by regiment. At 6 o'clock on the 15th, I was in the enclosure to call the roll by regiment. First, I found 133 Spaniards of Joseph Napoleon, and so on. After the roll call, I had them take up arms. I was not assigned a sergeant. Just a drummer and a little musician were my entire staff to manage 700 men. I had them shoulder arms and form columns. At 9 o'clock, soup. And at 10 o'clock, everyone was ready. My 2 comrades showed the same zeal. At 11 o'clock, Count Monthion arrived, quickly reviewed, and we left. Fortunately, I had a drummer. Otherwise, I would have marched silently. My little musician was on the right of the battalion with his small sword in hand. We arrived at the palace. I had my battalion form on the right in battle line, the 2 others behind me. I placed guides on the line. As they knew nothing, I had to take them by the arm, and the Emperor saw me from his balcony. I had them shoulder arms and commanded, "A line on the centre, guides, to your places." I corrected the alignment and took my place at the right of my battalion. Count Monthion went to see the Emperor. They descended, and I was signalled to approach. The Emperor asked me, How many cartridges are you missing? 373 packets, sire. Make a requisition for your cartridges and one for 2 rations of bread and meat. Shoulder arms by the right flank, and lead them to the square. I will have them guarded, and immediately to bread, meat, and cartridges. All the exits of the square were guarded, my columns formed. I took my workmen, went for the cartridges, and distributed them. Then I went for bread and meat. At 7 o'clock, all distributions were finished. I was famished. I went to eat and prepare my fine horse. I chose a dismounted cavalryman to serve as my orderly. I received the order to leave at 8 o'clock. Leaving Vilna, we found ourselves engulfed in forests. I left the head of my battalion to move to the rear and make sure all the stragglers followed, placing my little musician on the right to mark the pace. At night, I saw some deserters slipping into the underbrush, unable to make them return due to the darkness. I had to bite the bullet. What to do against such soldiers? I said to myself, they will all desert. They marched for 2 hours. The head of my battalion found a roundabout on the left of the road without trees, and they established themselves there on their own. The rear arrived to find the fires already lit. Imagine my surprise. What are you doing here? Why are you not marching? We have marched enough. We need rest and food. Fires were established, and so were the cooking pots. At midnight, here came the Emperor with his escort. Seeing my well-lit bivouac, he stopped and called me to his carriage. What are you doing here? But, Majesty, it is not I who command. It is them. I was bringing up the rear and found the head of the battalion established, fires lit. I already have many deserters who have returned to Vilna with their 2 rations. What to do alone with 700 stragglers? Do what you can, I will give orders to stop them. He left, and I stayed to spend the night with these unruly soldiers, regretting my sergeant's stripes. My troubles were far from over. In the morning, I had the assembly sounded and the recall at dawn, immediately getting on the road, informing them that the Emperor would arrest the deserters. I marched until noon, and leaving the woods, found a park of cows grazing in a meadow. My soldiers took their mess tins and went to milk the cows. I had to wait for them. In the evening, they always camped before nightfall, and whenever they found cows, we had to stop. How amusing for me. Finally, I arrived in woods far from towns, with large sections destroyed by flames. A burned forest bordered my right, and I noticed part of my troops taking to the right in this burnt wood. I galloped off to bring them back to the road. Imagine my surprise to see these soldiers turn and fire at me. I had to retreat. It was a plot by Joseph Napoleon's soldiers, all Spaniards. There were 133 of them. Not a single Frenchman was among these brigands. Arriving near my detachment, I had them form a circle and said, I am forced to make my report. Be Frenchmen and follow me. I will no longer bring up the rear. That is your concern. By the right flank. I left that cursed forest the same evening and arrived near a village with a cavalry station and a colonel guarding the junction to direct passing troops. Upon arrival, I made my report. He had my battalion camp, and based on my information, summoned Jews and his interpreter. Judging by the distance, he figured out where my deserters might have gone. He sent 50 horse chasseurs and the Jews to lead them. Halfway, they met oppressed peasants coming for help. They arrived at midnight, surrounded the village, and surprised the sleeping Spaniards. They seized them, disarmed them, and put their rifles in a cart. The men were tied up in small carts, well escorted. In the morning, at 8 o'clock, the 133 Spaniards arrived and were untied. The colonel had them form a rank and said, You have behaved badly. I will form you into groups. Are there any sergeants or corporals to form your groups? 2 sergeants revealed their stripes hidden by their coats. Stand there. Any corporals? 3 revealed themselves. Stand there. No more. Very well. Now you others. Draw lots. Those who drew a white ticket stood aside, and those who drew black stood apart. When it was over, he said, You have stolen, set fires, and fired on your officer. The law condemns you to death. You will face your punishment. I could have you all shot. I spare half of you. Let this serve as an example. Commander, have your battalion load arms. My adjutant will command the firing. 62 were shot. What a scene. I left immediately, my heart heavy, but the Jews were pleased. That was my initiation as a lieutenant. I wished to reach my destination, but the Marshal was ahead of me. In Gluskoye, where I found the guard, I set up my soldiers in bivouac and provided them with supplies. The next day, I left for Vitebsk, where 2 fierce battles had taken place. How I longed to be rid of this burdensome task. Finally, I arrived in Vitebsk, joyous, believing I was done. Not at all. The Marshal's corps was 3 leagues ahead. I went to take orders on the route, and returning, found only the drummer waiting for me. "Well, where are they? All gone? Say my drummer and soldier, they were told the 3rd Corps was only a league away." I left with my drummer and soldier. I had 3 leagues to go. I arrived at 4 o'clock near the Marshal's chief of staff. Aides de camp and officers laughed, seeing me alone with a drummer and a soldier. It is not fitting, gentlemen, to laugh at me. General, here is my route sheet. You will see my conduct since Vilna. After glancing at my report, the chief of staff took me aside. "Where are your soldiers?" They abandoned me in Vitebsk before entering the town, as I galloped off to get orders on the route I should follow to join you. They left, eager to rejoin their corps. As for the 62 executed, they were not French. But you have suffered with these stragglers. I sweated blood, General. I will present you to the Marshal. I know him, and he knows me. He will not laugh at seeing me as your officers did. They have hurt me. Come, my brave, let us not think of that. Come with me, I will settle it. He approached his officers. "Take this brave man to my tent, refresh him. I will go to the Marshal, for he brings news. You will see shortly. I will join you in a moment." He returned, taking my arm before his now embarrassed officers. "Come," he said, "the Marshal wants to see you." Seeing my uniform, the Marshal said, "You are one of my old grognards." "Yes, General. It was you who put card decks in my stockings to make me tall enough to be admitted among the grenadiers you commanded then." "True, I remember. You already had an honorary rifle from the Battle of Montebello and were decorated then." "Yes, General, the first in 1804. You are one of my old grenadiers. You will leave tomorrow. I will give you my dispatches. Where is your corps?" "Attached to the Emperor's small general staff under Count Monthion." "Ah, you are well. Tomorrow at 10 o'clock you will take my dispatches. Where are your men?" "I left them with the quartermaster to receive their certificates." "Well, tonight I want you to be on the field with them. Tomorrow at 10 you will leave for Vitebsk. You will find the Emperor there. I will give you a letter for Monthion." Near the officers, the Chief of Staff said, "This officer is our senior. Treat him as he deserves. He is well known to the Marshal. Prepare dinner, and after my aide-de-camp will take him to the corps chiefs for the returned men's receipts." Now they spoke quietly with me, and I was well received. After a good dinner, I was taken to the camp, where I found my returning soldiers, who rushed to ask forgiveness for their skirmish with me. "I have no complaints about your soldiers," I said. "It was zeal that carried them away." Arriving near the Spanish colonel, who was French, I asked for my receipt. But he said, "Half are missing. They are dead, Colonel. See the Marshal." "How? Dead? Half were shot. Well, I will shoot the others. They have their pardon. You do not have the right. They have suffered their penalty. It is for the Emperor to decide." "How many dead?" 62, including 2 sergeants and 3 corporals. "Give me details." "I cannot. The Marshal is waiting." "My receipt, please. I leave immediately." The aide-de-camp took him aside, and after a few words we left. The next day, at 8 o'clock, I was near the Marshal. "Here are your dispatches. Leave." At noon, I arrived in Vitebsk, near Count Monthion, and handed him my dispatches and receipts. He knew everything that had happened, and the Emperor was informed. The Marshal had written 2 words for me, which flattered my general. "You will not be on duty," he said, "until we reach the vicinity of Smolensk." Vitebsk is a large city where I found my former comrades and good chiefs. We stayed to await munitions. Excessive heat, combined with all sorts of privations, caused dysentery, leading to considerable losses in the army. The Emperor left Vitebsk on the night of August 12th. All the corps composing the army directly under his orders were thus gathered on August 14th on the left bank of the Dnieper, and they marched rapidly towards Smolensk, a fortified place about 32 leagues away. The investment was completed on the morning of August 17th. Napoleon ordered an attack along the entire line around 2 o'clock in the afternoon. The battle was one of the bloodiest. When it began, I was called to him. "You will leave immediately for Vitebsk with this order, instructing all, whatever their weapon, to assist you. At the relay stations, all horses are at your disposal if needed, except artillery horses. Are you mounted?" "Yes, sire. I have 2 horses. Take them. When one is exhausted, take the other. Complete this mission with all possible speed. I expect you tomorrow. It is 3 o'clock. Go." I mounted my horse. Count Monthion said, "Hurry, old friend. Take your second horse by hand and leave the first on the road, but they are both saddled. Leave your best saddle with my servants. Do not waste a minute." I left like lightning, my second horse in hand. When the first weakened under me, I dismounted, quickly unsaddled and resaddled, leaving my poor beast behind. I continued my journey. In a forest, I found canteens joining their corps. "Halt! A horse immediately. I leave mine fully equipped. I am in a hurry. Unharness and unsaddle my horse." "Here are 4 fine Polish horses," said the canteen man. "Which one do you want?" "That one. Saddle, saddle. It is urgent. I have no time." Ah, the good horse carried me far. In the forest I found correspondents protecting the route. Arriving at the post commander, "See my order. Quickly, a horse. Keep mine." No time lost reaching Vitebsk. I delivered my dispatches to the general commanding the place. After reading them, he said, "Feed this officer. Let him rest on a mattress for an hour. Prepare a good horse and an escorting chasseur for him. You will find a regiment camped near the woods. He can change horses there." An hour later, the general arrived. "Your package is ready, leave, my brave. If you have no delays en route, you will not take 24 hours, including time lost, changing horses." I left well mounted and well escorted. In the forest, I found the regiment camped. I presented my order to the colonel. Upon reading it, he said, "Give your horse, adjutant major. It is the Emperor's order. Unsaddle his horse quickly." I expected to find cavalry stations in the woods, but they were gone or captured. I was alone without an escort, pondering. I slowed my pace and saw, in the distance on a hill, cavalry dismounted. I moved to the side to avoid being seen, as they were surely Cossacks waiting. I skirted the forest, and suddenly a peasant emerged, saying, "Cossacks!" I had seen them. Without hesitation, I dismounted, grabbing my pistol, approached the peasant, showing gold in one hand and my pistol in the other. He understood and said, "Tok, tok," meaning good. Putting the gold in my waistcoat pocket, holding my horse by the bridle looped over my arm, pistol in my left hand, I followed the Russian, who led me along a path. After a long detour, he brought me back to my route, saying, "Nien, Nien, Cossacks!" I recognized the path upon seeing birches. Joyfully, I gave 3 Napoleons to my guide and mounted my horse. How I urged it on! The road disappeared behind me, and I reached a farm before my horse faltered. I rushed into the yard. Seeing 3 young doctors, I dismounted and ran to the stable. "This horse immediately. I leave you mine. Read this order." I mounted another good horse, but I needed at least 1 more to arrive, and night was falling. I could see no more. Fortunately, I met 4 well-mounted officers, repeated the same procedure. "Can you read this order from the Emperor to replace my horse?" A stout man I took for a general said to one of them, "Unsaddle your horse, give it to this officer. His orders are urgent, help him." I was saved. I reached the battlefield. I sought the Emperor, asking for him. I was told, "We do not know." Continuing, I left the road and saw some fires on my left. I found myself in brush. I advanced, passing near a battery, and was challenged. "Who goes there? Ordnance officer? Halt! You are heading for the enemy. Where is the Emperor? Come this way, I will take you to the post." Arriving near the officer, he said, "Take him to the Emperor's tent." "Thank you." I reached the tent. I announced myself. General Monthyon came out, saying, "It is you, my brave. I will present you to the Emperor immediately. He thinks you captured." My general said to the Emperor, "Here is the officer arriving from Vitebsk." I delivered my dispatches, and he, seeing my pitiful state, asked, "How did you get through the forest?" "The Cossacks were there." "With gold, sire. A peasant guided me around them." "How much did you give him?" 3 Napoleons. "And your horses?" "I have none left." "Monthyon, pay him his travel expenses, his 2 horses, and the 60 francs for the peasant. Give my old grognard time to re-equip. For his 2 horses, 600 francs and travel costs. I am pleased with you." This concludes the 9th part of the story. Thank you very much for listening. Please consider subscribing for more episodes.